Dear friends and followers, welcome back to my channel and to a great video on how to fly a traffic pattern in a Cessna 172 with classic gauges and using all necessary checklists to make this flight as professional as possible. If you click the link in the description box below, you can download the checklist I use in this video, and even better, you'll get a second complimentary checklist, which is an amplified version of the standard checklist where I explain every switch in its technical background, why it is placed to on or off, and much more to increase your system knowledge and confidence prior to your next sim or flight instructor's flight. Get it now so you can follow along during this video. And let's get started. Okay, here we are at London City Airport, beautiful Cessna 172. I have to admit I chose a bit of a sunset scenery just to make it look really beautiful. Here we are inside the cockpit. We start off with the pre-flight checklist. We set the parking brake. Why we do that, I actually highlighted a little bit more in the amplified version of the checklist, which you can download. We remove the control lock. That's sadly not given here in the sim. We turn on the master switch, meaning that all the cockpit lights actually come on. And then the next step, we've sort of powered the plane now with electrical power, and we extend the flaps. Why we do that, yet again, a thing explained in the amplified checklist. So the flaps are fully extended. Then we check the fuel quantity. Now we obviously have our fuel quantity gauges. It is helpful or recommended that you check them there, but also during your outside check that you do a visual inspection of your fuel level. Then you turn on the avionics master switch, just actually to turn on all the systems to see if all the radios and everything is working. We go up to the annunciator panel, do a test to see if all the lights are actually working, if they all light up. They're obviously, some of them are already lit up now because the engine's not running. Then we go down to the avionics master switch again, turn it off. We've tested all of that. The master switch then can be turned off. And then we check for the alternate static air. If that button is actually pushed in, that is for the static systems. And then we'll check the Hobbs meter, which I also explained in the amplified checklist, and the maintenance status and the arrows. Good, pre-flight check is completed. We would then go outside of the plane to do a thorough pre-flight inspection, or a so-called outside check. Check the oil, check the fuel, propeller blades, all the goods. Check all the hinges and so forth. We come back in, we do the before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspection is completed, obviously. We check that the doors are closed and latched. We've done that. We've done a passenger briefing. We check that our passengers have the seatbelts on. Now this is a good one here, the circuit breakers or panel check, meaning you actually use your hand and sort of swipe across it, and then all the circuit breakers have to be in, make it actually flush with the cockpit panel. The fuel selector needs to be in both. The fuel shutoff valve is on, actually on meaning it is on, there's fuel running through it, and then all the electrical equipment is off because we're intending to start the engine in a minute now. So before engine start check is completed, we continue with the engine start checklist. We power back up the airplane with the master switch on. Obviously, the beacon light comes on because you want to make everyone aware around the airplane that you are intending to start the engine or moving. Then we add the throttle a quarter of an inch. You can't really see that here. The fuel pump, we are priming the plane a little bit, but in order to do so, we obviously have to set the mixture. So you put the mixture full in, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You pull it back out, so the engine is now primed. It's back in idle cutoff. You turn off the fuel pump. You do clear prop. You check the area that no one's standing anywhere close to the plane. And then you go to the ignition switch and you flick the switch to start. Let that happen. So actually one hand is on the ignition, the other hand is on the mixture. And here you go. Push the mixture forward as you start the engine to actually give it some fuel. Then 1000 RPM, we immediately check the oil pressure. So that's in the green, all good. The avionics master switch can now come on. And that we've done the flaps check on the outside check, we can then put the flaps back into the fully up position. All right, the flaps are fully up. then the mixture as required, and then we will get our departure clearance and taxi clearance. I'll do that all in one. So the engine start checklist is completed. Okay, then we have a taxi checklist. We obviously taxiing, we want to turn the taxi light on. You never know if you're taxiing at night. The navigation lights I always recommend to turn on. You check for the instruments, meaning that your artificial horizon is uncaged, for example. Now the transponder has to come to standby. It is actually warming itself up. So you do that. And then when you actually initiate your first taxi or move, you then check your brakes and the steering of the brake pedals and the nose wheel steering. Left side clear, right side clear, and off we go. I mean, look at the colors now in the sunset. It's magnificent, really good, like it. Taxi check is complete. Then we, as London City doesn't really have a taxiway, we have to do a backtrack, and then we come to the holding point. So now this is a pretty long checklist now, the before takeoff checklist. We set the parking brake again. We need all hands on deck for this one, for this takeoff checklist. We check again that the doors and the windows are closed. Then we do the classic flight control check. Super important, is done in every plane, whatever plane you fly, you do the flight control check. So you go full right, full left, and then full up and full down. You could actually, in the Cessna, you could visually see what you're doing. You do the rudders left to right, and flight control check completed. You set the trim for takeoff. As a little marking where it says takeoff, you set it to that, or as required, yes. And then yet again, you check one more time the fuel quantity. Maybe, I don't know, had a fuel leak all the way on your taxi. You just want to make sure that you have enough and sufficient fuel. Now this is the run-up, super important. So the mixture is rich, the throttle goes to 1800 RPM, and now we do the magneto check. You see here I've amplified the RPM gauge a little bit that you can see a little bit better. So you have your hand on the ignition switch and you go to do the magneto check, you go right magnetos, you check for the RPM drop, not more than 150 RPM. You go back to both, let the engine come up again. You go to left magnetos, check again for the drop, and then go back to both, and that is your magneto check completed. You check for the suction gauge. All the engine instruments and the ammeter need to be checked that they're in green. Then we go up to the annunciator panel, check that all the lights have extinguished, looking good. And then we pull back the throttle to idle. Actually check if the engine is running smoothly at idle, it's also important. And then once we've done that, we apply 1000 RPM again. Mixture as required, and that is the run-up completed. Okay, then we want to set some flaps, obviously for takeoff. Cessna you don't actually need flaps, but I like taking off flaps 10. Then you check all the flight instruments, that everything is in green. I'll come back to that in a second. Then the avionics need to be set, so you would have to have tower frequency or approach control, what you would need for that traffic pattern. Departure briefing completed, releasing the parking brake, the before takeoff checklist completed. You can see it is a relatively long checklist. Then we do the lineup items or lineup checklist. We are entering now the runway, so we do the strobe lights on. The transponder needs to go to alt, meaning you are actually visible now on TCAS. Pitot heat if you would need it, like for example if it's winter operation. Mixture, yes again, full rich, lineup checks completed, and off we go. Look at my taxi skills. Approach sector clear, you would check to the right, check to the left, that everything's fine and clear, and then we would line up. I'm telling you, it was actually relatively difficult to keep it on a straight line with the rudder pedals. I think I did a fairly good job there. But look at that view, amazing. Now this is an important one. You want to check that the directional gyro is set with the runway heading, the compass heading, that they all align. That's what I meant with the instrument check. Here also set the heading bug to your runway heading, just to make it a little bit easier in a traffic pattern. We've got our takeoff clearance, we turn on the landing light, and we are more or less ready to go. You then, again, gently apply takeoff thrust. Don't just floor it, gently go for it. Here we go, we apply Takeoff power. Gently, gently, gently. Here we have now full takeoff power. Takeoff power is set as a call out. Then try to keep the artificial horizon on the center line, align that with it, and airspeed is alive. Sixty knots, and we rotate. A gentle pullback on the yoke, and we are already airborne. So we immediately pitch for 70 knots as the ideal climb speed. I mean, look at that view over London, fantastic. Okay, now the next step here on the so-called upwind, at 700 feet we'll retract our flaps and we'll turn left into the crosswind. So that's the next thing, the next step we're going to be doing. Still maintaining that 70 knots with a good climb rate somewhere between 500 to 800 feet per minute. And here we go. 700 feet, we retract our flaps. The flaps are up and we initiate that left turn standard rate, which you can ideally use with the turn and bank coordinator. And the next heading would be heading south. So we were taken off on 270, so minus 90 would be 180 degrees for our heading. And it's ideally with the heading buck, you can see now it's 90 degrees off, so I know that is going to be my next heading I need to maintain. So we're at 1,000 feet, which is traffic pattern altitude. I reduced the power to somewhere 2,200 RPM. I set the mixture, or I lean the plane. I check the engine gauges, everything's fine, and I'm keeping my airspeed somewhere between 80 to 90 knots. Climb checklist completed. Look at it, beautiful. Okay, now here we're in the traffic pattern. At a 45-degree angle off the runway, we then turn left into our downwind leg. Maintaining 1,000 feet, airspeed 90 knots, perfect, all is good, the power is set, everything's fine. Yet again, standard rate turn, using the turn and bank coordinator, keeping that ball in the center. And we're heading east, so now we have the heading buck at the back end, meaning showing west and east at the top. Perfect. Now this is some key advice I'm going to give you right now. I use the artificial horizon to point it right there, so if I keep that in line, I will always fly straight and heading towards that aiming point. Cruise checklist, power is set, mixture set, landing light we can turn off, and the heading indicator or compass are in line. So yet again, the compass is checked with the directional gyro. The descent checklist, we've got the weather, the fuel shutoff valve is on, the fuel selector is still in both, landing light as required, we'll keep it off for now, and the approach briefing is completed. Descent checklist complete. Alright, we are parallel to the runway, which is great. In the downwind right now, so the next turn is into the base leg. Now the next step is to set the flaps. Now I'm already reducing the power a little bit to get into the wide arc speed to set the flaps. And when do I set them? When I'm a beam of the runway threshold. That's right now, so I set flaps 10. Yet again, if I'm at a 45-degree angle to the runway, I turn into my base leg. So I'm checking, looking outside the window. It's the only way you can do it, really. And we turn left into the base leg. Now we're aiming for heading north. Yet again, we were flying east for now. Minus 90 degrees is heading north. Next step, wings level, I extend flaps 20. Okay, base leg and the wings are level, flaps 10, flaps 20 are coming out. And now I gradually start descending, because that is more or less the same point on the crosswind leg where we finished our climb. Now I start descending, going in the opposite direction. Okay, checking where the runway is. The runway is right there. Bringing down the speed a little bit. Landing checklist. Seatbelts on, fuel selector on, both. We haven't changed any of that. Mixture goes full rich, in this case at least. I'm turning final, flaps 30, and the mixture goes full rich. Landing light on, we've just got the landing clearance. Autopilot, we don't have it engaged obviously. Autopilot off. Landing checklist completed, clear to land. Now I only concentrate on the airspeed, the vertical speed, and the PAPI. And there I sort of arrange myself that I keep the PAPI to red to white and maintain that descent rate, and obviously the center line to make it a great landing. Fun fact, the glide slope is a little bit steeper here at London City. If I'm not mistaken, it's 3.5 degrees, so I'm coming in a little bit steeper than usual. There we go. Speed is great. We're going to bring it down a little bit, somewhere to 55 knots. PAPI is looking good. There we are. On the center line. Speed is good. Center line. I throttle back. Flare and touchdown. Yet again, keeping the artificial horizon on the center line and just rolling out. Happy, super happy. It was a great landing. I'm really pleased about that. And yes, we taxi off and we immediately start with the after landing checklist. As soon as we come off the runway, we turn off the strobe lights, trim we just reset it, then the mixture as required, and we retract the flaps. Transponder goes into standby. Pitot heat, if we had it on, we turn it off. After landing checklist completed. So I'll just shorten the taxi a little bit. We are at our gate position or stand, and we do the securing aircraft checklist. Parking brakes set. The avionics, don't need them anymore. We've done our last call. Turn them off. The magnetos, there's a ground check you could do. I didn't do it on this here right now. We just keep it as it is. The mixture goes to idle. You actually kill the engine by fuel starvation. You take its fuel, propeller comes to a stop, then we turn off the ignition switch like you would do in your car. You sadly can't take the key out in the simulator. All the electrical equipment is turned off, and then the master switch comes off. Right there, all the lights and obviously go out. Then the fuel selector is to set either left or right. I explained that a little bit more in the amplified checklist. And there we go. And then you record the HOB, so meaning the hours you've actually flown the plane, or the engine has been running, sorry. There we go. We've done that. And then we would place the chocks and the control lock. And then once the plane is tied down and the chocks are in place, you could then release the parking brake. Securing aircraft checklist completed. And obviously don't forget to fill out your logbook. I really hope you enjoyed this detailed video on how to fly a traffic pattern. I highly recommend you to click the link in the description box below to download your checklist with which you can truly enjoy your sim experience and be better prepared for your upcoming flight lesson with an instructor. You'll save time and money if you do it right from the beginning, and remember, every professional pilot works with checklists and began their career in a small plane. And thank you very much for watching. Here's your checklist for today. Subscribe to my channel, check. Activate the notification bell, check. Follow my Instagram account, check. And also become a Patreon, sign up to that. And don't forget, a good pilot is always learning. Wishing you all the best. Your Captain Joe.